Hi, welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, TIFF Senior International Programmer for Canada, and this is The Other Thing I Do. My guest this week is Chris Nash, an effects artist making his debut as a writer-director with In a Violent Nature, a remarkable deconstruction of slasher movies in general and the Friday the 13th series in particular. It premiered in the Midnight series at Sundance earlier this year, and it's opening in theaters across North America this Friday, May 31st. And if this is the kind of movie you're into, you should definitely check it out. Chris picked The Eclipse, Conor Mcpherson's casually chilling 2009 creeper starring Ciaran Hinds as Michael Farr, an Irish widower volunteering as a driver for his village's annual authors festival, who makes a connection to a writer, played by Eben Yelle, only to find he's got a romantic rival in a self-absorbed celebrity, played by Aidan Quinn, which would be bad enough, except that Michael is also being literally haunted. It's complicated, which is why The Eclipse is so memorable. This is Someone Else's Movie.
The Eclipse, I just feel like, is one of those movies that manages to balance genres in such an interesting way. Like, it is very much a horror movie when it's a horror movie. It's very much like just a traditional, like, beautiful romance love story when it's a love story, and it's also a satire too. Skewering, I guess, just the whole festival lifestyle, although it does it in, a literary festival. Like, when I watched it, I just felt so many parallels between it and like film festival circuit, and just how audiences are, and how filmmakers are, and how the actual like festival programmers are, and everything in between. I just feel like it's such an underrated film, and anytime I can be anywhere where more people can talk about it, I'm happy.
Underrated, yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because I loved it. I don't know why it's not talked about. I mean, I do. It's mostly distribution, right? It's just hard for people to see a small film that doesn't fit the categories exactly, but it is so good and so weird. I remember when it came out, I think it played in exactly 2 tiny theaters in Toronto, and I was just yelling, running up and down the street, trying to get people to go in and see it. And it was an April release. It was like a year after it premiered at Tribeca, and it just sort of fell between the cracks for everybody. And it's such a shame because Ciaran Hinds I do think it's his best performance. It is the only time I've seen him underplay this way, I think. And it's so interesting to just watch this powerful physical actor turn himself into a little ball, like just refuse to use his charisma. And we see it. We see flashes of it because this whole thing is about his character coming back to life, really, because he has a common interest with someone in hauntings, and their mutual understanding of, I don't know, the fungible boundary. I don't even know how to describe it without sounding academic, but the ideas this thing has about how we grieve and what's on the other side of grief, as well as life and death and everything else. It's so interesting and so fascinating, and it would not work, I don't think, if it wasn't for this incredibly charismatic man looking like he's about to cry all the time, like just playing such a small, vulnerable, open wound of a person.
Yeah, but at the same time, not pitiable at all. Like, that's one of these things where you just feel like he has the entire world on his shoulders, for what his world is. And I think it comes down to even just his role in the festival. Like, he's a driver, essentially. Like, he's driving the shuttles, but he takes it very seriously. And, when he misses like a deadline, it's like, or misses a pickup, or he's a little bit late, like we see it with his like first interaction with Aidan Quinn. It's like he just gets berated, and he takes that all in, like, listen, I'm very, very, very sorry. Like, I know I had one job to do. Not having him be sad. Like, I think that's the real magic of his performance, is that he's never sad. He's like, you can tell that he's dealing with a lot, but he's never like in a spiral. He's never allowing himself to be pitiable.
Yeah, he's just walled off, right? But it's inside. It's not that he's refusing to connect with other people, because that happens all the time in the film. But what we see is this performance of somebody who is holding himself back from really feeling because he needs to set the example, right? Like he needs to be strong for his kids. That's where it comes from, I think. And over and over again, you just see this false front that he puts up, not working. Like, people can see it. People crack, or it cracks, and people can see the cracks. His kids know what's going on. Like his father-in-law, who's suffering his own medical issues, that nothing gets past him. He knows what's going on, even though he's not really able to help. And there's this, I think it might have been Manola Dargis, one of the reviews, or Andrew O'Hare in Salon, one of the reviews at the time referred to the Northern European stoicism, the thing that you do, the poise that you adopt when you're struggling, that both he and Lena have this quality that prevents them from directly discussing the thing that they're discussing all the time, but it creates an intimacy between them. Like not speaking about it means they recognize it in one another. And so, yeah, the vulnerability comes through, and it becomes an unlikely, not salvation exactly, right? But each of them is opening a different window into themselves. And so the whole movie is about whether or not that will allow them to see each other properly. And then, of course, you have Aidan Quinn, who just shows up and ruins everything by just being a gargantuan narcissist and forcing himself into every interaction, which is a delight.
Oh yeah, I feel like his role in his portrayal of Nick in this movie is also something that's completely ignored, because I feel like so many things he does are brilliant, and just how even when he's leaving that first message for Lena at the start of the film, and you can tell it's very rehearsed, but at the same time he's stuttering over how he's rehearsing it, and he's trying to come off very cavalier and very like nonchalant, but like this is incredibly important to him. All of it comes through. I think, yeah, all for like a three-hander. Just everybody just brings their A game in this film. Yeah, it's a weird movie to talk about because, yeah, I mean, I don't talk about film very academically. I kind of just, when I watch films, all I remember about them is the feeling that I get when it's done. I'm not one of those people that can like spout off dialogue or like even walk through the plot from point A to B by the time it's over. But it's just that feeling that I get as it's done washing over me is all I remember. So we can speak about this academically, but and I think that there's a lot of avenues to talk about it, like from a critical lens like that. But it's also, you're right, it is such an emotional film that it's kind of hard to parse it out, like technically, of what it's doing. But what it's doing technically is so interesting too.
Yeah, I did not know. I mean, I went in blind and didn't know Conor Mcpherson was a playwright, although it makes so much sense when you find that out. But like that his primary work is a playwright. I had seen I Went Down, this incredibly funny film by Patty Breathnach in, I think it was 97 or 98, that maybe 98, that it actually made it to Canada. But it's maybe the movie I have tried hardest to resurrect, because the rights have disappeared and nobody knows where to find it. And it showed up on Tubi, of all places, if people are listening and looking to go see it. And it's just this tremendously entertaining, slightly broken, bittersweet, gangster-esque picture. It's gangster adjacent. It's about a guy just out on parole or finally released out. It's been forever since I've seen it, but it's just beautifully written and very lively in its direction. And then I heard nothing of him for another 10 or 11 years until The Eclipse came out. And I mean, I was lucky enough to see it at a press screening, like before it opened theatrically. Did you see it at the time? You seem a little bit young to have caught up to it.
I'm not too young. But no, at the time it was because we were still, pre full force streaming at this point. So I was using every means necessary to watch what I could. Take that for what it's worth. But
it happened.
It was one of these
ones. It was the way the world worked for a while.
Yeah, it was a film that was just on my radar, and I thought it was. I just finished watching Rome, so I was on a big kick. And then I found it, and yeah, it's just bowled me over. It was I was in Toronto at the time, so it wasn't something that I was even pursuing theatrically, or I think it probably had passed over theatrically by the time I'd even heard of it. But yeah, it's definitely always stuck with me, and I find that like mixing genres in a sincere way is one of the most difficult things to do. To have everything play out as if like paying tribute to all of the genre tropes that are that is each specific genre is built on, and not making fun of them or not selling any of them short. Like I'm just so amazed that everything works in this film. And I just watched it again this morning to like recap, and yeah, it's still just just it's a steamroller. And yeah.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I had forgotten the one major, I mean, I don't think it's a giveaway to say that there's a jump scare about halfway through the film, but I had forgotten how effective it is, and just it really does come. It doesn't come out of nowhere because it's what the film has been leading to, but the movie's realism lulls you into just sort of letting your guard down for anything truly fantastical or paranormal. And it's in the thing that I always compared it to, the thing that I compared it to at the time, and I have done ever since, is the way Kim Ji-woon just sort of weaves in this thread of unpleasantness throughout A Tale of Two Sisters, where, everything is perfectly normal and then somebody's screaming under the kitchen sink. And you don't understand what you're seeing. You understood the value and everything made sense of the domestic relationships, and the character stuff is all there. It's built, it's machine tooled. There's nothing wrong with it, nothing out of shape. And then all of a sudden it's disrupted by the supernatural. And the Eclipse does it in a very similar way, where haunting is almost mundane. It's like an expression of what Michael is going through. He is already haunted by the death of his wife, and now something else is literally haunting him. And then when the thing finally takes form and intrudes, it's so outsized and wrong looking and terrifying. And a lot of the reviews at the time, I went over them this morning myself, knocked the movie for going there. But I think you have to, because you need something that scares Ciaran Hinds, right? Like not the character, but you need to believe the actor is buying this. And the scale of the monster, such as it is, like, I don't even want to call it a monster, but the scale of the haunting, the scale of the presence is so outsized that he steps back in horror, and so do we. Like it was like getting punched in the stomach in the theater when that happened. That moment just bollocks you, which is lower than the stomach.
I haven't read any of the reviews of this film, like since I first heard of it. That blows my mind that anybody could be so opposed to like that moment, especially considering how effective that moment is. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. I think that as you're saying, like, just to piggyback on all that, it is the realism. It is the fact that everything is being played straight. I'm always trying to figure out like the magic trick of writing, just in general, and like how to make everything so convincing, and how to carry an audience along. And the more I think about it, the more I look at anything under a microscope, it seems to just be treating everything as natural as possible. Like if you treat, like, every moment is so natural in this film that you can't help but feel all the supernatural elements are actually really happening, and all the comedy is actually happening, and all these characters are completely believable and existing in this world.
Yeah, I wonder if anyone else could have pulled off the integration of Quinn, really, like this larger than life bon vivant jerk and supernatural elements, because he never faces them. They're completely, he's oblivious to everything that isn't him, so it makes sense that he'd be oblivious to this stuff as well. But having him there and just be this additional irritation that Michael has to deal with, and then a romantic rival as well, and all the other things that aren't being directly addressed. It does ground the rest of the film in a really effective way, right? Like, it's not just caring for your kids and coming to terms with your own grief and dealing with this asshole. There's also ghosts. And
Yeah.
the most basic reality, right, is shaken by this concept, but something about the movie makes it feel like the film, the story is playing fair. Like, the ghosts are even playing fair within their own way. They're only bothering him. They're not bothering the kids. The dog can hear them. But that's about as bad as it gets for everyone else. And it's just this one man carrying this thing, trying to figure out how to cope with it. The thing, I think the thing it does now that I'm seeing in a lot of film that I love is exactly what you said. It's the genre adjacent sensibility, where a movie is set in like unquestionably set in the real world. Nobody flies, nobody summons things, but the paranormal or the fantastical is just around the corner in its own room waiting for you to notice it. And if you don't notice it, it will get angry and come and bother you. But the naturalism of it, the fact that this isn't a movie that's shot with an exceptional amount of visual style, like, it looks great, but it's not polished. It's not touristy in the way that a lot of Irish film was right around that time, where they were just pouring all the resources. The whole UK film industry was pouring all their resources into making movies that looked beautiful so people would come and visit the sites. And this is not an unbeautiful place, but we see it through a layer of mourning. We see it through, like, MOURNING. People are sad all the time. People are carrying things. The people who live here have histories that they're bringing into the room with them. And the land is similarly oppressive. I remember it as constantly storming, even though it isn't. That's just how it is in my memory. I remember there being an active darkness, even though it's just natural light most of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really. See, I wasn't aware of any of the like pushing the tourism industry.
Oh, it's a whole thing after the Full Monty, yeah. Waking the Divine in the Full Monty just triggered it.
That makes so much sense. But this, yeah, I guess the Eclipse kind of flies in the face of that, because so much of Michael is not calling attention. Like, he is so familiar with this island on which he lives, and it's even there's that point where Lena makes him stop the car because she's like, "This view is beautiful," and he's just like, "All right, I guess."
Yeah,
I guess it's the same everywhere. Yeah, that's incredibly interesting.
and it just refuses all the commercial prospects, right? Like, all the possibilities. You could crank up the hauntings, or you could play up the sexiness of it, but it's just, he's just not interested. That's just not where the story lies for Mcpherson. He just wants to drill into this guy's life and see what else is going on, which again feels like a play. You could make a play, you could write a play about any one of these three principles. Like, for Quinn's character, it's a story of an author who's just hoping to get laid and runs into some annoying guy. And for Hiele's role, it's a woman who's lost but doesn't think she's lost and looking for something. And then you come back to Michael, and he knows how lost he is and how desperately he wants to have another connection with a human being. But he just, again, Hinds' restraint is so incredible. He gives Michael this, it's not even like, I think it's dignity. It's like a bruised dignity where he just won't ask for help or even for consolation. Because if he admits how bad it is, if he admits how horrible he feels, then everything falls apart. And, like, he's convinced himself that he's the only one who can hold his family together. And he probably is, but not for these reasons.
Not only does he not ask for help, he doesn't seem to ask for anything in the film. Like, anytime that he needs the smallest bit of anything from anybody, it feels like such a burden for him to whether, he needs some help with something, or even just asking when he has to approach his father-in-law at the start of the movie because he forgot to pick him up to go to the opening of the festival, and just you can feel all of the discomfort and all of the shame, where where Michael just, he, like I said, he takes it all on his shoulders. Like he has to take care of everything. He has to make sure that the family is still running well. And I mean, his father-in-law doesn't necessarily help him out too much in that scene either. But yeah.
Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. Last week, I wrote about the new releases of Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 2 from Warner and David Lynch's 1984 feature version from Via Vision, and new editions of Crimson Peak, The Crow, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, and Affliction. They're all good. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Semcast Blue Sky account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. It is this conversation with what a man is supposed to be, right? Like with what the head of a household is supposed to be in a very particular and kind of hidebound old school version of masculinity. Like this is not a man who grew up feeling like he could cry if he hurt himself. This is, we know everything about Michael through Hinds' countenance, through his bearing, like just the way he stoops himself. It is so unlike the imposing, blustering, warm but flinty version of this actor that we've seen over and over again. And he nails it and moves on, and then agents just started casting him in these movies again to where he could shout at people or wear a suit and yell about Jason Bourne. Like he has this whole other career for me that I want to see so much more of. And maybe he's doing it in movies that I'm not seeing, but I'm keeping my eye on him.
Yeah. We're talking a lot about him, but his Aidan Quinn as his foil too. I almost feel like he's the more interesting character, and I just feel that way with any antagonist, I guess. Like they should be the more interesting one, but Aidan Quinn's character of Nick, who's like this American blowhard and very much like if the film is talking about different forms of masculinity, then he is very much the proto North American. This is what it means to be a man. I'm going to shout from the rooftops. I'm going to get what I want, and at the same time, never get what I want and never know what I want. And
but blame everybody else.
Yes, exactly. And the theme of being haunted and haunting throughout the film, it's really interesting watching it again, seeing that Nick's character almost has haunting envy. Like he really wants to be haunted because he's always talking about the first real interaction between him and Lena. He's referring to this tryst that they had, and he says, "You've haunted me ever since." And I think at another point he's references something as haunting him, and it's like, no, it's not. It's not at all. You really wish that you could feel something that deeply, but it's so superficial. Just the way that he's so broad, and his broadness in the performance is intertwined with so many quiet details of what he's doing, to paint this multi-layered character. I really, this time around, for sure, watching Quinn's performance, I was like, oh, this is an amazing performance as well. That is just as shamefully lost in this movie that nobody's watching.
Absolutely, yeah. The fun part of revisiting any movie is that once, I have this theory about even a bad movie is more enjoyable the second time because your brain has already accustomed itself to disappointment. Like, you're not going to get the thing you wanted when you first saw it, but you can watch pieces of it. Going back to a good movie and finding the extra attention that's been paid to the stuff that you took for granted the first time through. And the fact that Quinn is having such a good time, and he's playing with his accent, and he's just always looking past people when he talks to them because he's hoping something more interesting will come along, or some part of his brain he's like a magpie. And the way he picks up haunting, and of course the whole point of Lena is that she writes about ghosts. So he's, whether or not he knows it, and I'm sure he does, he's using her own language to seduce her, or at least to attempt to seduce her, or he's trying to use her own language, because I still don't know how bright he is, which is also so much fun. Like, the emotional intelligence of this guy is incredible. He knows how to manipulate people. He knows how to play the room, but I don't know, like, we never really get a sense of how good of a writer he is. He's just around. And I think Mcpherson in his script has maybe a little disdain for superstar authors, because he'd been toiling in movie making for 15 years without being taken terribly seriously. And certainly for the guy who wrote I Went Down, watching Guy Ritchie come up and do his gangster thing like the next year, I think is probably a sore point.
Yeah, you can feel that. I don't know how to refer to it. Like,
It's not jealousy or envy, right? Like, it's a competition thing.
it's a competition thing, but there's got to be some envy in there, but feeling shame for being envious, like being very aware of, like, I shouldn't be feeling this way, because, like, you get the sense that Nick's writing elevated paperback, but he's not writing literature. Like,
There, yeah.
yeah, he's not putting too much of himself, or giving too much thought to the work that he does. But I mean, I have this notion with a lot of film. I'm very a cynical guy when it comes to films, but you don't need to write any or make anything smart. You just need to make something that will make an audience feel smart for watching it, and then
Yeah.
you're like, you're gold. That's all you have to do. And I feel like that's what Nick is doing. Like, and he's aware of that. He's aware that he doesn't have the um, like, definitely not the emotional intelligence, but just the general intelligence to write anything as good as, like, what Lena's doing, and affect people as much as she is with her work, and feels threatened. He seems to be very, very threatened by sincerity whenever he sees it.
Well, it's because he can't replicate it, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's the narcissist thing where they can do. Somebody put it, the thing about, it was Christian Bale, right? Of course it was. He was Christian Bale. He was talking about American Psycho and playing someone who has no emotions. He said the thing that gives away a true narcissist is the overemphasis on feeling. Like, they play it too much, and that's the tell, because they're replicating it rather than generating it. He said, like, the common qualities to Patrick Bateman's character and all the other monsters in the real world are that they can make you feel like you're the most important person in the world, but the second something else comes across, they just turn off and something else comes up, because they cannot turn it down naturally or turn it up. It's turned on or turned off. So it's a mimicry of humanity. And I don't know that I don't think Holden is a sociopath or necessarily, but he is really, really good at mirroring. And
Yeah.
he sort of adapts the tone of whatever. Even when he's talking to Michael in the car, he's calmer, he's quieter, but he still makes sure Michael knows that Nick is in charge, right? Like, he's definitely in a position of power, but he pretends he's trying to meet him on his level, when really he's just waiting for him to get to the destination so he doesn't ever have to think about this guy again. And then he keeps coming back into his life, which I think is just a wonderful runner for, like, this smarmy irritation thing that Quinn does.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely didn't look at it that way, as far as him trying to. When he's with Michael in the car, he's trying to be the everyman. Like, he's trying to be just like, yeah, I'm just like you. I work 9 to 5, blah, blah, blah. But then when it comes to, oh, do you box? Like, oh, I used to box. In fact,
Right.
I'm a good boxer. Yeah, everything is like, I'm on your level, but I'm also just above you.
Yeah.
I'm
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 slightly better at
just out of
you than
reach.
everything
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just I don't know. It's an interesting performance, and an interesting way to take that character. Um, and you get glimpses of you don't get glimpses of it. Everything is cloaked in doubt for him. Like like the confidence is so false.
Yeah.
Um, but but there's a split, there's a divide where I feel like half of Nick's character completely believes everything that he's saying, and the other half is also watching him going like, well, that's not true. That's not true at all. And when you see that play, when you see that volley back and forth, like within a single scene, yeah, there's just so much there, so much like, yeah. I talk a lot about magic tricks, whether they're in writing or acting, but that's the only way I can describe them. It's something that I have no idea how it's done. And once I figure out how it's done, then it's, yeah, I don't want to figure out how it's done. I just want to be able to experience it.
Yeah, he is a magic trick, really, because he's a visual illusion of himself. Like it's the moments where he says something and then just kind of waits an extra beat to make sure people buy it, which I have experienced people like
Yeah.
that. Oh.
Yeah. And oh, sorry. Just I'm in thought now, thinking thinking of that and thinking of playing opposite the other actors and them like allowing for that extra beat too, and just everybody kind of knowing what's up. Oh, stuff like that. Stuff like that just makes my skin tingle with with like how are they doing this? Um as far as the script goes too, like there's just such a an economy of dialogue. And this is definitely goes back to like uh his work as a playwright. You can tell like he just knows those lines, those like two or three lines in a scene where you can make the scene just be those two or three lines and that's it, and you get so much out of it and you get so much depth of the character. um I'm thinking just even the introduction of the film, and it starts out with the ceremony of the candle lighting, and then all you need to know, you get the sense that this is this grand thing happening, but all you need to know is like the MC just welcomes everybody to the festival, and that's it. And then the scene cuts out of that. But you're just prepared as an audience. You understand like, oh, this is our setting. This is something that's very grand and very important to a community of people, but they treat it like it's the most important thing that they're going to be doing this year. Um, and yeah, I'm always in awe of that when I see it, because it's definitely the thing that when you're writing or directing, you're striving for is just how do I make this as concise and succinct as possible. And there's other lines I'd always stuck out with me too, especially watching it the second time around, where Nick's at the bar and Michael picks him up and he's trying to gently push away this fan that he's also arguing with, with
Yeah.
about his own book. And then when he's talking to Nick, he's like you're late, and he describes it as like I was a sitting duck out there. Um, meaning like he has such disdain for his own fans.
Yeah. But he needs them so much.
Yeah, he needs the validation, but he hates him because he doesn't respect them because he knows that his work is not of the caliber that deserves respect. It's yeah, it's just so much depth in that character. And it could just be me projecting.
No, no, no. I
Onto
I think
him.
I think it's there. I would love to read the script actually to see how he's described in these scenes. Just like, does it just say Nick is irritated, or is it like Nick is shifting nervously? There's a million different ways to set that up for people reading it and for the actors playing it. And it's kind of really annoying to me that I've never had the chance to interview any of these people to ask them.
To talk to him about. Yeah, yeah, because it's yeah. I whenever this movie comes up to with because I mainly like hang out in like the genre horror circles as far as film goes,
Mhm.
and whenever it comes up, it's always like a shorthand with somebody who knows the film, and you're just like, okay, this is I know the type of person I'm talking to, and it's a snobby thing. It's so snob.
Well, I was
It's
going to
so
say,
snobby.
like,
It's so
how often
self-indulgent.
does it come up? How often do you find someone who's seen
Maybe once a year.
it? Mm.
Um, and this is, going through if I'm attending, you know, 4 to 6 festivals a year, because I always try to bring this film up. This film and Noah Bushel's The Phenom, which is another, if you haven't seen it, it's a baseball film with an incredible cast that is very much about baseball and not about baseball at all. But
Okay.
whenever, like within the genre community, just because The Eclipse is, for what it's worth, it is a ghost story. Um, yeah, very, very few people are even aware of it, which is such a shame. But those who know it can't stop talking about it when they find somebody else that does like it. But it always comes to a point too where where, where it's such a breezy, seemingly effortless piece of work that there's just this mutual admiration for like, yeah, that's we're very happy to have seen that, and I don't know how to describe it in a way. Like I find that even just mentioning like, yeah, I'd like to talk about this film, and then realizing like afterwards, like, I don't know if I want to talk about this film. I don't know if I want to know what's happening. I don't know if I want to think about it too much because I just enjoy the experience. And I get so much out of watching it and just being with the characters and being in these moments and riding this roller coaster that, it's not a roller coaster. There's certain films where I can, I use Canada's Wonderland as this as
Sure.
an
Yeah.
analogy where I actually got this from my cinematographer Pierce Dirks, who describes good movies as they're not the roller coasters that are, you know, built out of steel and have so many loops and like you're going all over the place. It's the Mighty Canadian Mindbuster at Wonderland. That is this old wooden roller coaster that you're on, and it's not going all over the place. It's not going too fast, but it's moving just enough where you're like, whoa, is this going to fall apart any second? And that's where the excitement is of knowing like what did I just step into, and I feel like this the Eclipse is a perfect example of that. There's not a lot of flash. There's almost no flash, but you do get those jolts, like when the ghost story kicks in and you get those really hard jolts. Uh, yeah, they just throw your heart rate up, and it's a fun ride to be on.
Yeah.
And also like by the end too. Um, I just watched this and I was so concerned that I'm just gonna be just red-eyed after I was done. It's like the ending just hits you with how uh with the hopefulness that it leaves you with. And it's not even it's a happy ending without any real closure, which is
Yeah.
incredibly difficult to do.
Yeah. It's something no one talks about in ghost stories and horror movies. Joanna Hogg sort of touches on it a little in The Eternal Daughter, where the loss of someone doesn't necessarily mean they're gone, but it also doesn't mean you have to be afraid of them coming back. There's a possibility, and here we have it in both the physical world and in the metaphysical world, where someone leaving doesn't mean he'll never see her again, and it's all about embracing the possibilities. It's what I've always found so fascinating about a movie like M. Night Shyamalan's Signs, where the the real revelation of that movie isn't the aliens or anything like that. It's that, spoilers for Signs, I guess, in that world, God is real and he cares. Like there is actually validation of the Catholic faith of specifically of Mel Gibson's character because he's a fallen priest, but it's remarkable that no one takes that away, because if you want to buy into the fiction of it and how ghosts work and how aliens work and all of the other things, that's all fine. But every time I float the idea that, okay, but what this movie is also saying is that this man will see his wife again, like these children will see their mother again someday. If you buy into the whole Catholic universe, it's an incredibly emotionally satisfying ending that people are afraid to talk about because it's created within the structure of organized religion.
Mm-hmm.
The Eclipse doesn't have the structure, so you can enjoy going out on the validation of the afterlife in a different way. And no ghost story ever really wants to talk about what it means to know that death isn't the end. Like, it's just, you're either all in or something like The Asphyx, where it's this wonderful quasi hammer horror stuffy British movie from the 1970s where scientists in the 19th century are arguing about the soul, or something as emotional as Signs, where it's there but it's not the focus of the film. And in The Eclipse, there is this slow comfort of what it means that you can be haunted, I think, that's really beautiful, and that also opens up the possibility that Michael might find something else to live for that isn't clinging to death. But that's, yeah, it's a deeply emotional argument for a movie to make, and for us to not necessarily, it took me a while to come around to it myself, but for not necessarily understand exactly what the ramifications are, I think that's kind of beautiful. And no one does this. Like, no one has ever tried it.
Yeah, and it's not ambiguous. That's the weird thing, too. It does. I feel like the movie answers itself, but I still don't. I don't know. I feel like I still don't have the life experience, I guess, to understand that answer. But it's one of these things that, like with this film, I feel like I can watch it, every 5 years and get something not new out of it, but just get another layer of depth out of it that I wouldn't have gotten the first time around. Which is why I think it's a great film too. Which is why I think it's one of these movies that should be talked about a lot more. Because it is just a masterful movie. And the last, I guess, haunting in it, not to to talk around it. So if anybody is fortunate enough to watch it, that it won't be ruined. But it almost, it is really terrifying. As you said, Michael is comforted. It gives him a comfort, but you can see so much fear. Like, he doesn't know what to do with that comfort, and that's now scary for him. Now that's now the terrifying thing. It's like, what do I do with this now that I know? Yeah, so much to think about with this film.
Yeah. And relatably so, right? Like, it's not an abstract conversation that the movie has with you. It's the whole straight line from what if ghosts were real and what would it mean to how would you feel? What would you do? Mm-hmm. And it's the relatability of starting with someone who's lost out, well, not everything, but almost everything that's mattered to him, and is still trying to pick up the pieces, and to give him this sliver of hope through horror. Because that's the other thing too that I think horror movies have done ever since they were created, is they either leave you with a validation of your moral structure by having, the good guys win, the final girl escapes, or whatever else, and then they also say, well, you tried, by having the sequel where the monster comes back, which is kind of bringing me to your film, where you're dealing with the entire history of the thing in the back of the shot that's coming closer and closer, that we don't ever get to escape forever. Like, you can't kill generic slashers as a concept. They just keep coming back, and you've dropped us into the other side of the screen, effectively. Like, you've foregrounded the background character and force us to just tag along with him or it.
Yeah, for good and ill, I think.
And, don't feel you have to get into spoilers or anything, because, I'm not even sure the movie can be spoiled, really, based on
no,
the mission
I don't think so, too. Yeah, because, the overall thesis of it is, this should be a movie that everybody knows what the end of it is by the time, as soon as they start watching it. We went at it with the idea that we're not going to do, anything new, essentially. We're except for put the camera in a different place. Mm-hmm. But we wanted it to feel like you're just watching a slasher film that you've seen a million times before, right down to the very rote dialogue between all the campers, chirping back and forth to each other. But I guess the older I've gotten, the more I've had to question what I find enjoyable about those films, or what I ever found enjoyable about those films. And the most joy I got out of them was when I was a kid, because you're just taking part in the taboo. You're watching the deaths. You're watching the scantily clad women. You're doing everything. You're there. You're jacked up on Coca-Cola and popcorn. You're feeling every second of it. Um, and then being embroiled into like the genre community and going to festivals and cons, and you see the attachment that fans have to these films. And I wonder like what it is at 25, 30, 40, 50 years old that you're still seeing in a slasher that, like, don't you ever like what there's no reason to question what it is that they're enjoying. So part of the thesis was we're just going to, like, by watching it from the slasher's point of view, we're kind of giving the most boiled down version of what a slasher film is. And it really is just, you know, for good or ill, you're walking from a we're getting 1.5 dimensions as far as characters goes at tops,
Yeah.
from one to another, and just watching them die, and that's it. And what is that? And there's definitely a lot of temptation to try to make this more of a traditional film in any sense and deviate from that hypothesis of like, no, we're gonna put these rules in place, we're gonna follow them and just see what we get out of this. And it might not be it might not be an enjoyable film, but it's at least gonna be, you know, it's at least gonna be a scientific document for what it's worth of this is what this would look like if we did that. Um, but it very much becomes uh, a movie about the repercussions of going through any kind of traumatic experience. I feel like the last 10, the only like movie, the only like important part, the only statement beyond the metatextual like slasher statement that I feel like the movie has is in those last 15 minutes of the film, where we slow right down. To almost a crawl. But at the same time, I feel I hear a lot of people talk about like, oh, that was a very, very tense scene. And watch it for me, I'm just like, I don't understand where any of the tension comes from because it's just two kids talking in a vehicle. But sorry, I was just going off at a tangent. I have no
No, no,
idea
no.
where this actually started.
I think that's exactly it. I think you've created a movie that does make us question why we watch the movies we watch and what we expect from them. And the thing that I love, my takeaway is it's a horrible existence. Like, he's not enjoying any of this. This is hell. This is someone else's hell. It's terrible that other people have to die to be part of it, but because say, and the Friday the 13th movies are the ones I always fall back on because they are the most simplistic distillation of the slasher film anyway. Because, and this is my favorite story, like Sean Cunningham, I believe it was, had a history in softcore when they tapped him to make Friday the 13th. So he replicated the structure of porn. So something has to happen every 8 minutes or the audience loses interest. And that's why the kills are as cyclical as they are in all of these movies, because he unknowingly or unwittingly set the rhythm of it. Because in Halloween, half an hour will go by and nothing happens in terms of violence. It's all about the build. But then this guy comes along and says, oh, I know what's missing. And he creates the repetition of arousal and release, more or less, that defines the idea that all it is mechanical, that all it is just people being pushed in front of the knife over and over again. And that would be, as you've pointed out in the film, that would be really boring for the killer too. Like, there's nothing for this guy to do but kill. And it's just, it's It's like a reverse Prometheus, where he's the bird who has to get the liver every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, very much so.
I hope I'm the first person to use the phrase reverse Prometheus because that's awesome.
Definitely are. uh, well, yeah, when a lot of the discussion I hear is like, "Whoa, that was so wild." Yeah, first person to use reverse Prometheus by a long shot.
People are going to think it's the Ridley Scott movie.
Oh, I absolutely. I never actually thought of it that way, as far as like from his point of view being like, this is a terrible existence. Because I try not to think about the slasher character at all.
Oh
I
wow.
really wanted to have it be have him be such an automaton that we don't. There's one failure I feel like I had in the film where there's a point where we see the slasher's face fully for the first time, and he's playing with the little toy car he found. Um, and at that point, I was like, oh, I feel like we got a little too close to him. I feel like the audiences are for that brief moment attaching some emotion to him, where that wasn't the. It's weird because it's like I wanted him to feel a memory and have us experience him questioning like a fleeting memory that could be like locked in his head, but I never wanted any empathy or sympathy or feeling like he's an actual person under there. Um,
That's really interesting. That is definitely what I got. It was just like this is his one moment of nothing where he
mhm.
doesn't have to kill, where he's not looking for another victim. He's just inhabiting the space for a second. And then he has to get back to it because whatever is driving him is forcing him back
Yeah,
into the routine.
yeah, yeah. I just feel like maybe it's just lingering in that moment a little too long
Well,
to make. Yeah, because I've heard audiences and like people talk to me about like that was a very strong moment for them of like realizing like, okay, this is who this character is. And I'm like, no, that's not who this character is at all. At all. This is it's like that I think it was the Spike Jones IKEA commercial where he just has a lamp on the sidewalk that somebody's throwing out and he's creating so much sympathy for it. And then at the end he's like, no, this is just a lamp. It's just stuff. It's garbage. Um, that's kind of like how I envisioned Johnny just being like he's just a lamp. We're not supposed to feel for him. He's the machine. Um,
but that's what we do. Like we put
yeah.
our emotions into anything we can as
Hmm.
humans, which is really frustrating
Yeah.
when you're trying to throw something out.
Yeah, yeah. No, I hoard craft supplies. I work in prosthetics as well, so I've got like any kind of like weird button or anything. I'm like, oh, this will come in really handy, and it'll be a huge if I don't throw it out. Then where will my life be? Uh,
I mean, it feels like you've done that with the slasher genre here. Like you've gathered up all the bits of it and reconstituted it into the thing that you've made.
uh, that might be a little too generous. Uh,
I don't know.
yeah, because to be quite honest, I still don't even know. I still haven't even given the film enough consideration. I think it doesn't have enough distance from me yet
That's
because it
fair.
was a very, very technical like exercise. Like I feel like I still haven't studied the results enough to know what it was we were trying to achieve with the film. Um, I'll watch it though. Still like it. I'm like, I
That's
want
good.
at some point in time I'll figure out why. I just don't know yet.
Well, to that end, and in one last attempt to unpack it before we run out of time, is there the last question on the podcast is always the same, which is there something from the movie you chose that you've used in your own work? Is there anything from the Eclipse? I couldn't really find it, but is there anything from the Eclipse that's worked its way into your own work, especially this film?
Um, I think the hyper realism that we touched on, like
Mm.
just the grounding, uh, definitely. Like I can see that. I can see, as fantastical as some of the death scenes are in a violent nature. I think it's the grounding of the monotony of everyday existence. Even though it's, The Eclipse is not a monotonous film, but you feel the weight of every day on Michael's character. I think that's definitely translates. That's something I've certainly picked up on, and also trying to juggle genres and seeing what happens if you like very sincerely treat a ghost story as a romance, as a love story, and trying to take a genre film and a slasher film, which is like a subgenre of a subgenre, and then bring elements of other films into it and see what happens. So much of it is just like, oh, let's see what happens if we do this, but also treating it with treating everything with respect. I think, like, beyond anything else, we definitely did not want to make a parody of slasher films. We wanted to like respect everything that came before it, and I think that's what The Eclipse does incredibly well. It doesn't pay disrespect to any of the different genres it's taking from.
Yeah, it just loves them.
Yeah. It's very much just a broad appreciation for different stories. So, yeah, I think that's probably something that I saw in that influenced me to choose The Eclipse.
My thanks to Chris Nash, whose first feature, In a Violent Nature, opens in theaters across North America this Friday, May 31st. Thanks also to Angie Power. She knows what she did. You can find Chris on Instagram at Gasfire Films, all one word, and you can find The Eclipse on Blu-ray and DVD from Magnolia Home Entertainment in the US and Mongrel Media in Canada, and streaming on Tubi and Plex in Canada, and on Vudu, Tubi, Canopy, and Redbox in the US. It's also available to rent or buy on various VOD services across North America. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 44 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get the new booster when you can. I'll see you next week.